Well, it's now 4 o'clock, everyone, and I'll call this council meeting of Mapleton Township for Tuesday, February 28th to order. If you're able, please rise for O Canada. Thank you. An exciting day here yesterday in Mapleton when we did an announcement of just over $2 million in federal funding to help us with our new Drayton sewage pumping station. So it's great news for Mapleton to be able to secure some of that money, and we look forward to securing a lot more. That's what Manny and I, that's our job, is go out there and secure funding, and we'll just keep working at it as much as we can. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Confirmation of minutes. Moved by Councillor Ottens, seconded by Councillor Tamlin, that the minutes of the Township of Mapleton Council meeting held on February 14th, 2023 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. We have no matters arising from the minutes. We will go into item number 6, which is matters under the Planning Act. We have a few consent applications. We'll get to the first one. Moved by Councillor Tamlin, second by Councillor Ottens, that the Council of the Township of Mapleton support consent application B10/23 as presented for the lands described as Part Lot 14, Concession 7, with the following conditions: that the owner satisfy all the requirements of the local municipality, financial and otherwise, for the proper and orderly development of the subject lands, including but not limited to outstanding taxes. That payment be made of a fee of $355 for a letter of clearance. That a copy of the deposited reference plan be submitted to the township. And further, that the council authorizes the planning and development manager to file with the secretary treasurer of the planning and land division committee at the county of Wellington a letter of clearance of these conditions on completion of the same. Does council have any questions for the planner on this? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to item 6.2, another consent application. Moved by Councillor Ottens, seconded by Councillor Tamlin, that the Council of the Corporation of Township support consent application B11/2023 and B12/23 as presented for lands described as Part Lot 15, Concession 6, with the following conditions: that the owner satisfy all the requirements of the municipality, financial and otherwise, for the proper and orderly development of the subject lands, including and not limited to the outstanding taxes. That payment be made of a fee of $355 for a letter of clearance. That a copy of the deposits reference plan be submitted to the township. And further, that council authorizes the planning and development manager to file with the secretary treasurer of the planning and land division committee at the county of Wellington a letter of clearance of these conditions on completion of the same. Any questions to the planner on this consent application? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Linda. These two dwellings, it looks like there's another dwelling being constructed at the moment, correct? Does that have any impact at all with, so there's essentially 4 dwellings there within probably an original farm parcel. Is that kind of the motivator for this application itself today?
I don't know what you mean by motivator. These 2 lots are historical lots. They've been there. I think they're just asking for more land. They, the minimum lot size in that area is 1 acre. These lots are undersized under the current zoning standards, so they're bringing them into conformity with that.
Any other questions? Any follow-up on that, Councilor Martin? Then all in favor? That's carried. Moving on to the next consent. Item 6.3, moved by Councilor Tamlin, second by Councilor Ottens, that the council of the Township of Mapleton support consent application B16/23 as presented for lands described as part lot 20 concession 1 with the following conditions: that the owner satisfy all the requirements of the local municipality, financial and otherwise, for the proper and orderly development of the subject lands, including but not limited to outstanding taxes, that a copy of the deposited reference plan be submitted to the township, that MDS 1 can be satisfied for parcel A, that payment be made of a fee of $355 for a letter of clearance, that an EIS and tree conservation compensation plan should be provided demonstrating no negative impact will occur to the forest feature. The study should include the future development of the lands, and further that the council authorizes the planning and development manager to file with the secretary treasurer of the Planning and Land Division Committee at the County of Wellington a letter of clearance of these conditions on completion of the same. Questions to the planner from council? Councilor Ottens.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Is there a reason why the lot wouldn't just go straight to the boundary line and just make it an even parcel and not leave that little sliver there? Or is that all about size limitations?
Through you, Mayor, I'm assuming you mean the larger piece that's being merged where the forest, yeah. So initially, when they pre-consulted with staff, they pre-consulted with the township as well as the county. And they were proposing that it go right to the rail, it's the rail trail there. The problem is that these lands are designated greenlands in the official plan, and under the greenland designation, when you are applying to sever lands, you have to demonstrate that there's no negative impact on the greenland feature, which is in this case, the forest. The reason they're acquiring this land is that they want to expand their business that's on that property now. And the expansion is actually going to result in the removal of a lot of trees. So between the discussions between the township as well as the county, we had indicated that you need to demonstrate, like you need to justify the need to remove all those trees in the expansion. So one of the things they did is they chose to make it smaller. The EIS has since been completed. They're proposing to remove 4,000 trees, believe it or not, from that space. This has just come to light, so I did want to bring it forward to council. And, you know, I have spoken with the county, and the removal of the trees will not happen until such time that the expansion occurs, which they will need to go through a zone amendment for that. So it will be back before you, before this council, before that happens. The issue is the compensation planting. We want to see some trees planted. It's just a matter of where can that occur. So having said all that, that size might change even further because of that, those 2 issues that have come up in the meantime. So that is the whole point of that. Keeping that piece small is to protect that feature.
Thank you. Further questions? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. It's carried. Moving on to the next item. We have a delegation from the Minto Mapleton Family Health Team. So we're going to have Shirley Dr. Peterkin, Allison Armstrong, and of course, Jody Codwell, all here today regarding the professional recruitment update. So I'll turn it over to you. To the podium, please, and hit the red button. Oh, you get the podium today.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Shirley Borges. During the daytime, I'm the Family Health Team Executive Director. And during other times, I'm your recruitment chair. And it gives me pleasure today to update you on our activities over the past year. It's really great to have a team with us today. And I'll just maybe introduce folks to start. So behind me is Allison Armstrong, kind of the legs behind the operation as our recruiter. Hi, Allison. And Dr. Peterkin. Many of you are familiar with Dr. Peterkin, a family practice here in Mapleton at the Mapleton Health Center, working out of our hospital and various other places, as well as a recruitment member on our team. And Jody Caldwell, nurse practitioner, working with us for, Jody, how many? 13 years at the Mapleton Health Center, and brings a lot of experience and I think some maybe information today around the nurse practitioner piece and how NPs can be part of the solution to our recruitment issues. So about a year ago, just as a bit of an update, we had 9 physicians in our Mapleton Minto community. And in June, Dr. Okoye left for a city practice. Her practice was in Palmerston, leaving about 1,700 patients without a primary care provider. The long story short, in January, the majority of those patients, over 1,000, were transferred to 3 nurse practitioners, about 750 patients, and the remaining going to some of our family physicians. Unfortunately, not all patients were absorbed in these practices. We really tried to look at our Minto and Mapleton catchment area as a priority. And so some of those folks currently are without a primary care provider. So there's a lot of work to be done in our area around recruitment and retention of family physicians. I think the really interesting piece is that the majority of these patients have been picked up by our nurse practitioners and are currently seeing their nurse practitioners sometime, so for some of them for the very first time, and doing really well in the current practices. We also have a physician in Palmerston, Dr. Wilgotts, who's going on maternity leave in May. And so we've had to ante up our efforts, and pleased to say that we have pretty much confirmed 2 locums, 2 physicians who will be covering her 1-year maternity leave, which is really great news for her patients. And also for Dr. Wilgotts, who really would like to have a 1-year mat leave with her first baby. So that's kind of the lie of the land. Some good, some not so good. Alice, I'm just wondering if you could maybe come forward and highlight some of our activities over the past year, how we use some of our funding and where we're at with our marketing, things like that. Thanks.
I'll try not to reiterate the report that we sent out, but basically there's a global shortage right now of healthcare staff. So that goes everything from physicians right through to nurses. So it has been a very challenging, I would say, few years for us, whether it's at the hospital dealing with COVID or just our staff shortages right now. So I have to give hats off to our team. They're amazing. Everybody's pulled together. We're trying to think different ways to recruit people. We're very fortunate to have 2 people come in to cover a practice and maternity leave. A lot of that thanks has to go to Dr. Peterkin. The reason why those people are coming to stay and work here is because she trained them in Minto Mapleton. So they were able to come in, have an experience here, a very good experience, and then they're able to graduate and step into that role. So thank you, Dr. Peterkin, for that. We know we are in a very competitive market. I've been to Collingwood. I was just up there on Friday for the Rural Ontario Medical Program, and you've got communities from Kapuskasing to Peterborough, all over Ontario. They're all competing for the same people. We know many of the graduates that are coming out right now have high debt load. They cannot get a mortgage for a house. So in their mind, why would they settle down and set up shop in a primary care practice where you'll have overhead and administrative costs and all these other things? So that's pushing them to look at different ways to pay off debt. So that could be locuming, which some of the people that are covering our mat leave are doing. So you can come in, you don't have your overhead expense, but you're able to locum for a physician and help pay some of that debt down. Or many are going into what's called a hospitalist, which is a new role. And those are physicians that are hired specifically for hospitals to look after inpatients. We don't use that model in our Palmerston Hospital. Our rural family physicians do it all. So they are our primary care doctor in our community clinic, but they're also our OB doctor, our ER doctor, our inpatient doctor, our surgical assist doctor. They're the doctor of everything. So, and again, we appreciate that so much. However, we're having problems attracting that type of candidate. So part of our strategy has been medical training, which again, Dr. Peterkin's been carrying the load for that. So to get people into the community and experience it. And I think once they experience it, they realize how exciting it is. They would be bored if it was just every day in an office. So we're just trying to up how many people we can get into the community and then provide them the most positive experience when they're here. So from a community perspective, if there's anything people can help with in terms of donations or gift certificates or getting them out for dinners, theater, we're welcome to taking those things just to make it a great experience. We also took funding that we had last year and we put it into a promotional video. So every time I go to a recruitment fair, I get a list of medical resident trainees and I'm able to email them. So we're going to be sending our video out that we did just this past year. And it's just a little commercial for Minto Mapleton and healthcare recruitment. And Allie Hill was instrumental in helping with that, as well as Belinda Wick and Dr. Deacon and Dr. Sun. Dr. Peterkin was away at that time. Otherwise, we would have had her in the video. So we've had a lot of positive response from that. So when people come for locums, or if they're interested in locums, sending out that video helps them to make that decision. Our trainees that are coming in, it kind of gives them a taste for what they'll experience. And it's also a way just to get the message and put us on the map that, hey, we're here and this is what we have to offer. So part of our success is from our partnerships. Our municipalities are a big part of those partnerships. We can't thank you enough. Our family health team, our family health organizations, it's everybody working together. And even, you know, all our NPs, everybody that is part of our team, it makes such a difference for the health of our community. So I don't know if you have any questions for me right now, or did you want to show that video? It's about 35 seconds. Not that I know that, but yeah.
We're going to key up the video.
Okay. Okay. Stops me from talking to, because I could talk for hours. That was longer than 35 seconds, I know, but it got you looking at it. Did it not? Did it not? That's what I tell the trainees at the recruitment fair. And then they're watching it and it's like, oh, okay, that was good. So Anyhow, any questions for me before Dr. Peterkin or Jody come up? No?
Please go to Dr. Peterkin
Okay,
and Jody,
Dr.
either one.
Peterkin.
We'll do the questions at the end.
The famous podium. So I'm going to talk a bit about the residency program. So it continues to be well supported. We had a bit of a lull last summer, but picked up full force in the fall and are actually booked straight through right now until well into the summer, which is nice. Our choose your own adventure approach has really been well received by our interns as they really get to tailor their experiences to what is of interest to them. And I feel like this is truly in alignment with the flavor that we've seen in our new grads, being more assertive in what they want out of their careers. And the beauty is that we can offer them those many options right here in our very own backyard, which is awesome. With our amazing orientation, complete with swag bag that all the residents get, showcasing a lot of our community perks and gems, for example, gift certificates to like Alamode, as you saw in the video, or even to the theater. We also have private housing and gym access that we provide for our residents. So we truly pull out all the stops for these folks coming through to ensure that their experience is a memorable one. Being able to grab a free coffee at Alamode or take in a local show at the theater, these are all ways that we can help our residents feel welcome and are extremely appreciated by those who come through. So if you ask yourself, what can we do as a community, as a council, as a township to support the residents who come through? As Allison intimated, anything that can help to further welcome the residents so that they feel like this is someplace that they could see themselves living, being a part of, setting roots down in. Anything that the community can do to support us in that way would be extremely appreciated. And I'll just end by making a couple of comments. So before I came, I asked my resident, I told her that I was going to be coming to the council office to present for the recruitment committee. And I asked her from her perspective, what are the things that you would be, looking for in coming to a community, and what kind of things would you expect that a group such as yourselves in leadership would be able to offer, to bring to the table, to help. And one of the things she said was spousal support. So a lot of times when residents come through or new grads come through, they come with a partner or a family. And we've talked about this at previous sessions like this. And it really is tricky because we can't change the fact that we're rural. Like, we are who we are, right? So like we can't, set up a, RIM park, around the corner for all the engineers who need that kind of, facility. But what we can do is help to make whatever else is going to be part of their family life a little bit easier. And that could be housing, that could be, tax breaks or whatever the case may be, opportunities, networking opportunities, all things like that would be things to consider. The other thing she mentioned was about flexibility. So as Allison said as well, there are a lot of locums who are going to be coming through these rural areas, looking to pay down debt, not really ready to commit, but just looking to have an opportunity to, test the waters in different places. Housing is a big thing for our residents who are our new grads who are coming through looking for these types of jobs. Most of the time, we don't have what's what I'm looking for, the inventory to be able to have like a turnkey operation for folks coming through. And so if the township is able to help out with that, even so that when somebody is interested in coming to spend some time in our area, they don't have to do the guesswork of where am I going to stay, who's going to support me, like how am I going to get to where I need to get, all these things. Those would also be things that would be very helpful. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for all of your support.
So, Shirley's gonna give you a little handout that we've made. Hopefully, some of the information on it is things you already know, but I probably anticipate there's some information here about nurse practitioners that's maybe new to you. So I'm going to start off by sort of explaining the nurse practitioner role for those that maybe are uncertain or don't know or haven't had experience with that. And so nurse practitioners are registered nurses who've done their undergrad experience, have had at least 2 years of work service, and then at this point, they are master's trained with an additional year. So they certainly have about 8 years of work and educational experience. This allows us to independently diagnose, assess, prescribe, order tests, make specialist referrals, and develop treatment plans for patients. So it really allows us in primary care, especially, to provide patients with most of their healthcare needs independently. If you flip to the next page, like to the back of that first flyer there, when I first started in 2009, I was part of an initiative called a Grow Your Own Nurse Practitioner. So that was actually a government funded program. And at that time here in Minto Mapleton, you weren't able to recruit a nurse practitioner. And so that did pay my nursing salary while I went to school, and then had a 2-year return of service and paid my compensated me for my education. And I've been here for 13 years. So I think, understanding those sorts of incentives for nurse practitioners are important. The piece with it as well is back in 2009, when I first started practicing, there were several limitations on my scope of practice, including things like I could order certain medication and only renew others. And you can see from that expansion of scope of practice over the past decade, especially, the Ontario government has expanded our scope dramatically to include ordering all medications, ordering controlled substances, ordering CTs, MRIs, and there really is no limit on our scope of practice at this point, as long as it's within our competency and judgment to provide that care. So that's where, the little graph there sort of showing back in 2009, we had to significantly consult with physicians. And at this point where we're at, the consultation has dramatically decreased and the independence of nurse practitioners has dramatically increased. Dr. Peterkin and I have been partners in crime for a long time. So, and I think that's where we've really taken the role from what used to be referred to as a supervising role to a collaborative role, right? And that's what we're really looking for nurse practitioners. So given that increased independence, I think that's where we are really uniquely positioned to help fill this gap in primary care. I also sit as a board member of the Nurse Practitioner Association of Ontario. So that's really a message that we're trying to push as when you're thinking of gaps in healthcare, be thinking nurse practitioner as the answer. So we know that our care helps to improve access to patients, has effective outcomes, decreases ER wait times, reduces hospital readmissions. We have really high satisfaction rates. It's cost effective, reduces wait times, and overall alleviates pressure on the system. So I think a big part of what we are wanting to highlight for you is sort of three specific messages, is that, given that increase in scope, we should be pushing that nurse practitioners could answer this call to unrostered patients in our community. And there needs to be a push for that to be an option and a very viable option. We have medical residents regularly. For the past decade, I too have had nurse practitioner students. One of them here is Katie. She's actually with us for our second semester because it was such a great experience, right, Katie? And so I have students from McMaster, from Western, Laurentian, Athabasca. I think something to really take into consideration, not including myself as a Grow Your Own Nurse Practitioner, 3 out of the 5 current nurse practitioners were our students. 2 of them grew up in this community, right? So I think we sort of have the opposite problem of the physician recruitment, where we don't have a recruitment problem. We currently have a nurse practitioner who's covering a maternity leave, and she was our student and she would love to work here. In fact, coming here, she's working part-time. She said, I will work here full-time. We don't have funding. We don't have any funding. And that's where I hope that we go out and get the funding. Let's do that, right? So there currently is no funding for expansion of scope of positions within our family health team. There's lots of different models that nurse practitioners can practice in the province. Lots of people here, nurse practitioner led clinic, which is a newer concept, I should say, than family health teams. And while that's a great option, I think, I've met with our MPP, Matthew Ray, and, he's unique in the province of having an entire constituent that has primary care from family health teams. Not most places don't have that. And so I think, we could very quickly, as we did transition to taking Dr. Okoye's patients, if we had more funding to hire more nurse practitioners within our family health team, I think it would be supportive. It would be done quickly and with very minimal barriers. And so I think that's where we're asking for your support in looking at that and sending that message that we nurse practitioners can be an answer locally. Yeah, and I think the last piece is that I've constructed sort of a draft of a letter to help support that for you, to make that easy for you. So this is actually, there's a website called supportnursepractitioners.ca, and that is a auto-populated letter that you can send to your MPP of pushing for nurse practitioner practice. I've adapted this to sort of speak specifically to rural and our unique circumstance. So I'm happy to provide that to you in a draft copy that if you guys agree to send that out, and when you meet with him, asking, why aren't we getting more nurse practitioner funding? So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
All right, thank you. So questions now from council to the health team. And I'll start off with one. Who wants to go to Toronto and do a delegation with myself and Mayor Turton then on this? Because we're going to be going to the Good Roads Conference, and we have, now's the time to put in that delegation request. So if we have your team wanting to come with us, we will put in a delegation request and we will go in front of the minister or the minister's staff.
Yeah,
Does that sound good?
absolutely. Absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right. I see a lot of head shaking, so I guess that's a good thing. So Mr. Barron will make that happen. He's probably typing it up right now. Second question, when we talk about, I'm guessing that the doctors and nurses know about the loan forgiveness from the federal government and they take advantage of that when they come here
I don't believe that goes to any nurse practitioners.
The federal government in 2023's budget, I believe, 2022's budget, 23 budget included nurses in this. So you might want to check that out because it was included for nurses. It was, so for nurses, 30,000 for nurses, 60,000 for the doctors for forgiveness of the federal loans. So check into that because that might be also an incentive for helping. And I know this is something with right across Canada, this is a problem because on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities where I sit, we've just had some meetings last week and we're talking about this and talking about advocating to the federal government, not only for interprovincial movement of staff, but also for people coming from different countries for their accreditation and making it. So that's on the federal radar for us as municipalities as well. So we're pushing it that way. So we definitely would do at the Good Roads, we'll do a delegation for provincially looking for the funding you're looking for. So we can have those nurse practitioners, which are very important. I know that I've been serviced by nurse practitioners myself, so it all works out. Other questions from council? Council Martin?
So as far as information about the logistics of housing, the locums and those on residents as well, it'd be really good to, I guess, figures on like how much of the year you're looking for somebody, what's the between someone in residence or a locum plus family as well, just to be very specific about what that need is, so we can put it out there and work with those kind of numbers and just look at, is it 12 months of the year? Is it this? And is, and just to get a sense of even just what's coming up in the next 6 months. I think that'd be really useful to know that kind of information. Yep. Okay.
What else you got?
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's really important. We are currently looking at a locum for Dr. Wilgott's practice, and one of the requests was housing for his wife and pet. And we need to work with you on this because we don't have houses lined up to say, oh, you can fit here. The issue is though, it's not consistent, or it's not like, every month we need this. We may need this for 6 months and then not again for another 6 months. But being able to communicate and having, the pulse to the ground around housing availability would be really helpful. So I commend your comment on this.
Anybody else want to speak to that? Okay. Other questions from council members then? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Councillor Martin.
just one more. In a conversation recently as well, I know we're talking about a barrier of funding as far as nurse practitioners as well, but there was a nurse, I think it was working here. There was like also the salary that was available was an issue, because not too far away, that salary was like way more, right? So they're really questioning the affordability of living in this community as regarding just to pop in next door as well. I'm not sure how that can be addressed, or because what other incentives or that could be.
So, and Shirley can correct me here if I'm wrong, but so under the Association of Family Health Teams, we are advocating for increase in primary care funding, not just for expansion, but also for retention of current staff, because currently there is, we have not had a raise increase, a market value increase. So there is currently a collaborative job, how to describe it? Market refresh occurring between AFDO, Nurse Practitioner Association, looking at the individual positions within the family health team and what the current market value is. However, to put that in perspective, the last one was done in 2012, and it took until 2017 for any funding to occur, and we're in 2023. So in the time that I've worked here in 13 years, I've had one market value raise. So yes, that is an absolute concern. And if you can advocate on that, that would also be helpful, because it's hard to compete and it's hard to draw people to come to, to work in this practice. And that's been a big piece with the nurse practitioners in general. You might have heard and this is also applies to our community, is called something, the attending nurse practitioners in long-term care. So this is where they haven't been able to have physicians work in long-term care. And though there is no, like a hospitalist, there's no physician checking in on those patients on a regular basis, or if there's urgent concerns. And so what they've done is made nurse practitioners the attending primary care provider in those long-term care. However, they significantly underfunded those positions and no one wants to work in it. So that's the message that you have to, especially in the current state of inflation. And, we have several staff that are severely underfunded. And it is a huge issue on recruitment and retention. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much, all of you, for your delegating today. The resolution I have is moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Tamlin, that Township of Mapleton Council receive for information a delegation of Minto Mapleton Family Health Team regarding a professional recruitment update, and further that Township Mapleton Council authorize and support Minto Mapleton Family Health Team's professional recruitment and retention efforts in 2023, continuing with an annual financial contribution of $10,000. Any questions on that resolution? Then I'll call a question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you all. Yeah, you can go now. Next, we have up from the hospice, we have Julie Martin Jansen.
So hi, everybody. I have spoke to council before, probably over a year and a bit ago, but thank you for having me back. My role is to bring supports from Hospice Wellington out into the rural communities. So I'm everywhere but Guelph. I don't know if the girls want to pull up my PowerPoint. There we go. So I just would like to tell you and some of the new members here on council a little bit about, Hospice Wellington supports and what we have. And our big motto is your story matters. And a lot of times when people think about hospice, they hear that word hospice, they think that's just the place or that building where you go to die. But I want to change your perspective on that today. And I want you to know that hospice is a lot more than just our residential building and supporting people who are palliative. So we do have a residential facility, and that is on the corner of Courtright and Scottsdale in Guelph. And we do have a 10-bed facility there that we do provide supports, end-of-life supports for people in their last 3 months of life. We support that person we do personalized care, and it's very person-centered, but it's not only to provide supports to that person in hospice, it's to provide supports to their family through their care and as caregivers and family members, but also when the person does die, we do provide supports to the person with bereavement support. So we don't just say, okay, sorry, your loved one has passed away, so now we can't support you. We are here to support everyone. And anybody can go to hospice. You don't have to actually live in Wellington County. Anyone can go to Hospice Wellington, and it's free. So some people are very worried and concerned about what the cost is to go or send their family member to Hospice Wellington, and there is absolutely no cost. All of our supports are free. So the next. So on top of the residents, we have the wonderful 10-bed residents, and we have wonderful nurses and I'm sorry to say no nurse practitioners, but we do have wonderful nurses, RPNs and PSWs that work and support people that are in the beds. But we also have below that 10-bed facility, we have community services. So in addition to that, what we provide up in the residence, we also provide services in the community. So we do things for people who are palliative, for anyone who's a caregiver and anyone who is grieving in the community. So that's anywhere in Wellington County. But that also extends to people who have used our residence. So if they came from Toronto, we still provide that bereavement support to that family after. But for the most part, we are community services. We have a palliative day program at the building, and we have some bereavement supports and caregiver group and art therapy and music therapy. But we also provide that out in the community. So that's where I was hired. So we'll go to the next slide. So I just broke it down into a little bit of what does palliative mean and what supports do we provide for those palliative people in the community. And it is that person-centered approach that addresses the person as a whole, not just their illness. And we do talk about their wishes and their worries, and we help support not only them, but their families. And the goal is to help them as early on as possible. So early on in that diagnosis, so that life-limiting illness diagnosis, whether it be cancer, Alzheimer's, COPD. We want to help support that people early, or those people early on. And that's where we rely on our wonderful family health teams, is the doctors, the nurse practitioners, the social workers. That's where we get our referrals from, is from the people in the community. So with that, we are able to go in, and there's sort of three parts to what our role in the community is. And specifically for rural, the big part is this promotion and educating people in the community about what hospice is. Because again, a lot of people hear that word hospice and they go, oh, geez, I'm not ready for that. And that's where you go to die. It isn't all about that. It is about the whole journey and helping people through that journey. So with our palliative clients in the community and in the residents, we do provide one-on-one support. So we have a wonderful list of volunteers. We have about 180 volunteers right now who will provide one-on-one supports. We do have a vigil that is in the long-term care homes. So we believe at hospice that nobody should die alone. So we do provide, I think there's 8 long-term care homes in the rural community that we are in there with our volunteers. And in the last 24 to 48 hours of someone's life, if they're family or they don't have family, or that they don't have anybody to sit with them, we will provide a support for somebody to stay with that person. We also have wellness supports for anyone who's palliative. So we have Reiki treatments that they do on location in Guelph, but we also have what's called distance Reiki and distance therapeutic touch. We have music therapy, art therapy that they can do there. Music therapy we have out in rural, which yay. We have a group in Elora and at the Elora Center for Arts, and we have one out of Rockwood. And then we also are music therapy, because last year at our fundraiser for Handbags for Hospice, we did a fund in need, and it was to expand our music therapy program. So she got more hours, which was lovely. She went from working only Wednesdays and to now 4 days a week. And she does a lot of therapy up in the residence, which is wonderful and lovely. And everybody there really, really enjoys having her up there. And then she will, when somebody does pass away, if she's in the building, we do our ceremony where the person is being taken out by the funeral home, and she will play music, whatever the family requests. So that's another wonderful thing. She's also been able to provide some one-on-one supports in the community where she either does virtual supports over the phone, or she will go to the person's home and provide music therapy support for that person. So then we go on to our caregivers, and our caregiver can get so overwhelmed. It's not a paid position. It's something that has been, your loved one becomes sick, so then you're now responsible, and you sometimes are the primary care person for that loved one. And it can be very, very hard to juggle caring for someone you love, having your own family, maybe still working, and then trying to manage all that. So what we try to support that caregiver or those caregivers is we have group supports. So we have a caregiver, we have 3 now caregiver supports groups out in rural. So I have one in Harrison at the Old Post, that's every other Friday. I have one in Rockwood, that's every other Friday. And I've teamed up with the Mount Forest Family Health Team and the Cancer Care Coordinator to provide a caregiver support group the last Monday of the month up in Mount Forest. So those are all really wonderful things that we're able to offer for caregivers. We also can provide caregivers with one-on-one supports. So if they just need somebody to talk to because how they're feeling, they may not want to talk to their family members about it. So we offer volunteers that will either, if they want in-person, phone supports, whatever it is, we can offer that. However, I will tell you, it is harder to get volunteers up into the north. So we are hopefully recruiting, and we do volunteer training every twice a year. So we just have another one coming up, and usually there's 15 people in each session that we do our volunteer training. And they usually there's so many different jobs that our volunteers can do, and they usually kind of tell us what they like, but we really are kind of trying to get more people from rural to become volunteers for hospice so that we can have more supports up in the more north areas. All right, so I talked a little bit about our wellness supports, the music therapy. Art therapy usually is, we don't have art therapy out in rural yet. We have lost our art therapist, but we do have another part-time art therapist that's working with us. But all our wellness supports are for anyone who's palliative, a caregiver, or who are grieving. So those wellness supports are there to support them as well. And those are also all offered up on the residence except for the art therapy. So people who are grieving, the bereaved, the groups that we have and that we offer for them, a lot of them are out of our Guelph location or virtually. So we're really trying to get more bereavement supports out into rural and have some groups. So we're looking, our bereavement coordinator can't kind of do it all. So we are looking to pay to have a facilitator to come out, but I also need volunteers. So that's another big sort of issue with that. So that's why we try to at least offer a virtual program. We do have 2 walking programs, bereavement walking programs, one in Marden, and I just started one in September up in Mount Forest, and it's really expanding. So that's wonderful. The next slide is the other supports we have for education and resource. We have a lending library out of the Guelph office with a happy lamp, that full spectrum lamp that people can come in, sit, grab a book, and just read it. We do advanced care planning workshops. So we have presentations, workbooks, and all that. And then I brought some for everyone here. There's our new guide to end of life planning, because we feel that's really important people don't want to talk about death. So death or dying, but it's really, really important to plan and have that plan, the just in case plan, so that people have. And so we're really trying to get that out there. And we created this booklet with the help of a lot of people in the community. I'm sure Shirley being one of them, that we sent it out and then put this lovely guide booklet together that we have out pretty much everywhere in rural. So then my role is as advocate resource counselor. This is a lovely picture of Oscar and Clara Bookbinder. The reason why I'm standing here today is because these 2 lovely people who both died at our Hospice Wellington residence left $250,000 of their estate to Hospice Wellington, specifically to get supports out into rural. They felt very, very strongly that rural had a lot of missing gaps. So what Hospice Wellington did with the money that they got from the estate was they put a group of people together and talked about, I think were you on that committee? Yeah. So Shirley was on that committee. So they had people in the community, people who we were supporting that had a life-limiting illness. We contacted social workers. I think the paramedic team was on there, and just looked at what are the gaps in the rural communities. So before I even started, this is what they did. So the next slide talks a little bit about what those gaps were. And it was looking at the need for someone to go into people's home and do that deep listening and supporting them on what their wishes are or their worries are, or what could we support them with. So part of our role being out in rural is not to take away any supports that are already there. So my role when I started was to look at what services and supports are already in the rural communities. Is there a bereavement support group? What do they have for caregivers? So it was creating those partnerships. And I've been lucky enough to have 4 different office locations in the rural community, one being with Shirley at the family health team in Drayton. I have a place in Mount Forest, in Erin, and in Rockwood. So I've had Hospice Wellington has been welcomed so much in the rural communities that so creating these partnerships and these networking is learning to what is actually out there, or who I would call if I don't know. So offering those resources to people in their homes is really wonderful. Like sometimes people we go there on a referral, and sometimes it's just like, I need foot care, or I need, I'd really love somebody to come and clean. So I go and look up what's around, what can they get? And then I offer those resources. And it might not be something Hospice Wellington can provide, but I'm certainly there to be there for that person. So looking at the gaps, So what we have happening right now is, as I said, sorry, can you go to the next slide? As I said, we have those caregiver groups that we started up, and those have been really well received. It did take me about 3 tries and 3 times of promoting them to get people to actually sign up. Because we know there's caregivers out there, there's people who need supports out there, but it's just so hard to come forward. And sometimes people don't know those supports are there. Just like some people don't know that all these other wonderful things that Hospice Wellington offers it for the community members. We have the walking groups going. We do have music therapy now in rural. And again, the partnerships that I mentioned before with the family health teams, the Alzheimer's Society, the cancer care coordinators, and our senior center. So I have 3 different senior centers, specifically in Drayton, the Senior Center for Excellence. Helen Edwards has been absolutely wonderful, letting us come in and do workshops and presentations to the seniors too. Like even on, I think we did one on our guide booklet on the importance of pre-planning. We did one on anticipatory grief. We've done one on grief over the holidays. I've done a bunch of lunch and learns in the different areas. So those have all been wonderful, and that partnership really makes a difference to help promote Hospice Wellington. So the desired outcome of us being in rural is to build and maintain those strong relationships and collaborations and partnerships, and making sure community members know what services that we do provide. And then that providing that exceptional care to people who are at end of life, who are palliative, who have that diagnosis. And again, like I said early on, is what we're hoping to be in there, helping people with resources, or even just how to have those conversations with their families. So those are the things that when we I've been able to go to the staff meetings at the family health teams to just talk about a little bit about what this is that we want to do, and letting the doctors and nurse practitioners and nurses and the social workers know that, oh yeah, I can send you to hospice, because as we just heard, there's like a huge shortage. So if there's any way that we can help at hospice to lighten that load for some of the social workers, or to even have that resource for the doctors and nurse practitioners and nurses, then it's just another resource for the families to help support them. So what's next is, again, we're hoping to get into some of the long-term care homes. Oh, okay, yep. Well, then we'll just go right to the next one. Is obviously they feel very strongly about being out in rural and providing these supports for Hospice Wellington in the community for members. And it's in our strategic plan for this year. So if anybody wants a copy of the strategic plan, I can happily send it to you. But there's 3 parts of the strategic plan, and rural is one huge part about it, and expanding rural and making sure we're staying out in the rural communities. So at the end of the 3-year pilot project, it's not just going to stop and go, okay, well, we have no funding. We're going to still be out here, hopefully supporting people in the community. So then I've left for you our At a Glance, which is our program flyers that tells you we put this out 4 times a year, and it's got all our programs and supports that we're offering in Guelph, but also in the rural community. All right, so go to the next one. Yeah. So then hospice, basically all of our programs are at no cost. There is no cost for anybody. There's no fee for any support service, workshop, anything like that. There's no cost to come to our residents. And our funding is basically 30% is ministry funded, and the other 70% we need to find through fundraising, donations, estate donations. And with our fundraisers, we have those big 3. I don't know if anybody's on handbags for hospice the other day, but that was one of our big fundraisers. And the next one is our hike for hospice. And then we have a golf tournament and our tree of remembrance. So that is it. So hopefully that helped you understand a little bit more about what Hospice Wellington does. And if you know of anybody in the community that needs support, just let them know that we are here to support them. And that's my contact information. And Larry also has that. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
You got questions from council on the hospice? You covered it very well, Julie. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you again for having me and to let me get the word out there.
Thank you. I have a motion here, resolution moved by Councillor Tamlin, second by Councillor Ottens, that the Township Mapleton Council receive for information a delegation of Hospice Wellington regarding information for rural supports and awareness for new council members. If there's no other questions, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, Julie. Moving right along, we do have the next delegation, which is SEMA Plus. And then we're going online with SEMA Plus. Alexandra, I believe.
Hi there, everybody. I think that we might have lost video on your end.
I'm not sure.
You really don't want to see us anyway, so it's all.
Oh, there we go.
Awesome, thank you.
So go ahead when you're ready.
Just let me know when you see my screen. And I will share. I think I'm not sharing the proper one. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for inviting us to the Township of Mapleton's council meeting. We're here to present our GHG inventory for the community that we conducted over last year with the baseline year of 2021. So today we're going to present very briefly our company, SEMA. We're going to look at the GHG emissions reporting requirements, the GHG emissions to consider in a municipality, as well as present to you the final results from Mapleton's 2021 GHG inventory, and we will leave room for questions and answers at the end. So I am here with my colleagues, Christophe Jenkins, as well as Alexandra Lazarevic, and we all worked on the GHG inventory. I am the Director of Sustainable Development at SEMA. We are an engineering firm with offices throughout Canada. At SEMA, we strongly believe that engineering exists to improve, enhance the lives around us within our own company and our communities. It all begins by understanding the needs of our clients. That means collaborating, working one-on-one and side-by-side to thoroughly evaluate how we can deliver the best project. This process leads to innovation, sustainable ideas designed to meet our greatest challenges, including climate change and limited resources. Because when you engineer for your people, you engineer for a better world. We have services in more than 7 sectors, including buildings engineering, energy and resources, transportation, infrastructure, communication systems, environment, and of course, sustainable development. We specialize in many engineering disciplines, including land development, stormwater management, structural geomatics, communications systems, energy, including solar and wind, environment, project management, urban planning, water and wastewater treatments and conveyance, transportation, landscape architect, and municipal infrastructure. So today we are here to present our report on the GHG emissions. So the Global Covenant of Mayors and Federation of Canadian Municipalities promotes the use of the Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Inventories. It's a standardized way for municipalities to collect and report their actions on climate change, developed by the World Resource Institute, C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, and ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability. We utilize this Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse, you'll see the acronym GPC, while developing the Township 2021 GHG inventory, which provides cities and municipalities with a globally recognized and accepted framework to identify, calculate, and report on GHG emissions within a specified boundary. So the objectives of the GHG emissions was to develop a comprehensive and robust GHG inventory to better understand the emissions contributions of different activities in the community, establish a base year GHG emissions inventory, set GHG reduction targets, and track performance. Ensure consistent and transparent measurement and reporting of your emissions, as well as provide data for benchmarking purposes of comparable Canadian municipalities and cities. And this robust and transparent framework has been built to echo the 2019 refinement of the 2006 IPCC guidelines, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as well as the National Inventory Report. All activity data is derived from official documentation, such as Statistics Canada and the National Inventory Report, or from primary utility providers such as Hydro One and Enbridge, as well as specific information provided by the Township of Mapleton or the County of Wellington. This is an outline of the table of contents of our final report. Feel free to take a look. I think you all have a copy. And we started with of course, an introduction, the description of the inventory, our methodology, as well as the results, conclusions, incentive and funding programs, our community consultation and engagement meetings that we had in December, as well as recommendations for setting targets and next steps. What was great, I think, was that we were able to develop tools that will be utilized by Mapleton in order to continue on reporting their GHG inventory year over year. And there are several options for disclosure and reporting. The first one being the Carbon Disclosure Project. Some examples of cities that are using this disclosure and reporting platform are the City of Kitchener and the City of Toronto. It's a non-for-profit charity that runs the global disclosure system for investors, companies, cities, states, and regions to manage their environmental impacts. Currently, there's about 90 countries disclosure on their CDP on an annual basis. There's also the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate Energy, and this is where you see this diagram. It comes from the Global Covenant of Mayors, where they have a lot of great resources for municipalities such as yours. Examples of cities that are using this disclosure platform is the City of Waterloo, Durham Region, as well as the City of Guelph. So this is the largest global alliance for city climate leadership on a global scale. There's over 11,500 cities and local governments spanning 6 continents, 142 countries, representing over 1 billion civilians. So it's an interesting way to disclose your GHG inventory, if that's what you choose to do. And then lastly, there's the Partners for Climate Protection, which was created from the Local Government for Sustainability and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to motivate municipalities to their part in climate change. So the GHG emissions to consider in a municipality, when we look at the different sources and the boundaries for the township, we can see this figure here that demonstrates the boundaries as well as the sources of emissions. Scope 1, we can consider that these are all emissions that are located within the city boundary. We can think about the in-boundary waste and wastewater, stationary fuel consumption, in-boundary transportation, industrial processes and product use that we will use the acronym IPPU, as well as the agricultural, forest, and other land use. Within the scope 2 is the GHG emissions occurring from the use of grid supplies, electricity, heat, steam, and or cooling within the boundary. And scope 3 are those emissions that are occurring outside the boundary from activities taking place outside. So these are the strategies that we use to develop the GHG inventory. What was interesting with the Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gases is that it offers 2 different levels of reporting. So the GPC Basic is an inventory reporting level that includes all scope 1 sources except for energy generation, imported waste, and IPPU, and AFOLU, as well as scope 2 sources. So the GPC Basic Plus includes all of the reporting levels, including scope 1, scope 3, and scope 2 for AFLU and IPPU as well. So specifically, it expands the reporting scope to include the emissions from industrial process and product use, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, and transboundary transportation. And this was important for the township of Mapleton to pursue with the higher level of reporting because of your farming community. Once again, these are the type of sources of emissions that were found in Mapleton. And they were broken down in 4 different categories: stationary energy, transportation, waste, and agriculture, forestry, and other land use. There were no emission sources from the IPPU. And lastly, this is a table that you will find in our report that clearly defines the different sources, with whether they are scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and if they are included in basic or basic plus. I will now ask Alex to present to you the results from our inventory.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. I wanted to firstly talk about the basic reporting. The basic level reporting excludes AFOLU, as Julie mentioned, so that's not including the agriculture, forestry, and other land use category. So as we see on the screen, this totaled to about over 97,000 tons of carbon equivalent. So in total, this accounted for about 95% of this was from scope 1 emissions, which we can see being derived from on-road transportation as an example, building energy use, so within the manufacturing sector, commercial, and residential. And then totaling, we discovered that this actually accounts for 8.9 tons of CO2e per capita within the township of Mapleton. If you could go to the next slide, Julie. Great. So this one here talks about the AFOLU sector, which is used within the basic plus reporting of the GPC. So this does include all of the agricultural and farming practices within the community. And I did want to identify that all of these sources here are 100% biogenic sources, and I'll dive a bit deeper into what that actually means within the next slide. So a total emissions within this category was 241,211 tons of carbon equivalents. To dive a little bit, oh, sorry, Julie. The graph on the screen, you can see that a lot of this is mainly derived from enteric fermentation at around 53%, which is known as the livestock farming within the community, followed by soil management and manure management. So there are no sources within the IPPU category, as we can see, along with the other scope 3 emissions. As indicated in the last slide, for basic plus reporting, biogenic sources are those that are derived from natural sources like living organisms that eventually circle back into the atmosphere. However, it's important to highlight that methane, when it is released, as you can see within the graphic, it has a much higher global warming potential. So CO2, it's at 1, while global warming potential of methane is at around 28 times more impactful, and takes about 12 years to transform back into carbon and re-enter into the carbon cycle. To further analyze the biogenic sources within the 2021 inventory year, wastewater, solid waste, composting, ethanol, fleet vehicles, and AFOLU emissions are all categorized within this category of biogenic. So we can see that through the graph, enteric fermentation has the highest amount of methane that we spoke about in the last figure within its overall emissions, so the yellow bar right there, followed by manure management, which also has yellow being the methane. This can be much more impactful as opposed to comparing it to liming and urea. On-road transportation. So this means how all of you got to council today and to the meeting. So including all of the vehicles and the usage within the municipality. So this has been calculated using surveys like Transportation Tomorrow surveys, census data, and Statistics Canada vehicle sales within the region. The data therefore shows that about 45% of the overall township's profile is derived from on-road transportation emissions derived from fossil fuel combustions. This is from diesel and gasoline powered vehicles. So we can see within the graphic that the highest on-road transportation emissions from the residential homes is derived from diesel powered vans, SUVs, and trucks. The manufacturing sector in total accounts for about 16% of the township's overall greenhouse gas emissions, of which the data had been calculated mainly utilizing local utility providers, so Enbridge and Hydro One, along with some Statistics Canada data. Majority of these emissions are categorized as Scope 1, which we previously spoke about. So that includes off-road vehicle use, electricity, natural gas, as an example. Of the overall greenhouse gas profile for the township, about 10% of that is derived from the residential sector, with the following graph outlining the stationary residential emissions by type. So similar to the other trends, we can see that a lot of the emissions are derived from natural gas usage within homes. This data has also been derived from your local utility providers. Waste overall accounts for just under 2% of the township's overall emissions inventory. So with these emissions being considered as biogenic sources, as previously outlined, this data for solid and biological waste has been derived from the County of Wellington, with biological encompassing the composting within the township. So the wastewater portion, we actually got the data from the SEMA Plus engineers, which are working on the Moorfield and Drayton facilities within the township. Lastly, I wanted to touch base on some of the corporate emissions, which we spoke about previously. And this is reported under the GPC within the commercial and institutional emissions category, and is categorized by public versus private emissions. So about 13% of the community's greenhouse gas emissions are derived from the commercial and institutional sector, with about 2% of that 13 being from the corporate municipal emissions, so being the township's footprint. Taking a closer look into these emissions, the vehicle fleet driven by the staff within the township accounts for the highest emissions, being about 63%. This does not include the ethanol emissions from varying municipal fleets that we understand that some of the fire trucks are run off of, as an example. Secondly, the buildings within the township account for about 36% of the overall community's profile. The municipality's waste is currently not tracked on this level. However, it is recommended. After gaining an understanding of the overall inventory of the township, it's important to set reduction measures and targets into place to work towards a goal in alignment with that of the Government of Canada's net zero emissions by 2050. Within the report that we had provided, we outlined a variety of reduction measures focused on the areas that had been brought up within the community engagement sessions, which we had held in December of 2022, with residential sectors, agricultural communities, and business owners, and aims of brainstorming those ideas that can be actioned. So within the slide, we can see that it's important to focus on education and awareness. So as an example, forming a sustainability committee within the township and educating some of the younger youth and inspiring them on climate change and the topics around climate change. The building sector accounts for the majority of Scope 1 emissions within the profile, and therefore through actions like improving the building's envelope, electrification of appliances, and renewable energy sources, these targets are definitely attainable. The transportation sector, through integration of smart city planning, through bike paths and EV charging stations, we understand that this is something that Mapleton will be implementing, which is excellent. And then decreasing waste production and increasing waste diversion. This will definitely be attainable through an increase in educational and awareness campaigns. And then lastly, agriculture and natural assets. we outlined a lot of funds that are available through the provincial and federal level in aims of working towards our fight against climate change. To follow, we actually provided a listing of global mitigation measures that are used within the agricultural sector that's provided by the IPCC sixth report. These can all be adapted on a localized level, but we didn't include them within the report, but certainly can if the council wishes. The following graph depicts the greenhouse gas reductions that should be met per sector in order to achieve the target of 80% reduction by 2050. The bars showcase community emissions that are running from bottom to top, and then the line graphs that are running from left to right outline the corporate emissions reductions. And then as previously outlined, these are some of those mitigation measures that were outlined within the IPCC's sixth report. Some of them being carbon management, soil carbon management through opportunities like crop rotation, perennial cropping using agroforestry. There's also biochar applications, and there's a lot of opportunities here specifically in reducing the enteric CH4 emissions, so the methane when it is fed to livestock. Next slide, Julie. And then some of the other measures that are outlined here is agroforestry. So by integrating trees and shrubs, I understand that there's a lot of windbreaks currently within the community. This can increase land productivity. Through enteric fermentation, there's great ongoing research that's being focused on how to decrease the emissions from livestock, crop management. There's also opportunities here through slow and controlled release fertilizers, and then manure management as well.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much for the delegation. Questions then from members of council to the delegation on this report? As we wait for council, we'll have Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when we originally did the study, it was fascinating. We had a public and we had a kind of a agricultural session, and the agricultural session was much better attended. So it was nice to see the passion that our folks have. I received a couple calls today with some concerns that maybe we weren't proactive in sharing the information that this was going to be presented at council, and that wasn't intentional. However, in order for us to move forward with the report, we had to kind of bring it out of draft and had a presentation to council and have council at least receive and file. But I just wanted to make sure that our partners in the agricultural part of Mapleton understand that they are indeed an important part of this conversation. And it's just process because council was wise enough to ask for a committee to be struck to deal with these kind of things. And once that committee is struck and once the terms of reference and things are all ironed out, we absolutely will look forward to discussing this report and other environmental issues with the agricultural community. So I just wanted to make sure that was mentioned based on the telephone calls that we got today, and hopefully that I can put your minds at ease that you will absolutely be involved arm in arm with us with this report and coming up with tangible solutions to the climate change and GHG emissions.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. So we'll turn it over to council then for questions. Councilor Tamlin, any questions?
Yeah, not so much question. I just wanted to say more thank you. I think this document really, from the presentations you did before, kind of really brings it all together. I think having seen the presentation a few times now, it makes a lot more sense. But it's a really great baseline in which to work from and really clearly set out. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Tamlin. Anything else? It's quite comprehensive, this. Councillor Ottens.
Yes, thank you through you, Mayor. Just, yeah, reiterating what, our CAO said too. I know there is some fear within the ag community that this sort of report where our plan is to kind of legislate farmers out of farming. And of course, that's not what we want to do here. And having our sustainability committee or whatever we're going to call it, I think it's really important to get some of these people involved in that and have that input, the same input we had at the public meeting, the people that were there and are quite animated about the whole procedure to get that input in there, because they have a lot of good ideas. And we see this in the list here on this other report that we have, all the different things that they're already doing, and to encourage that and to make it part of a more comprehensive committee. And as I've said to them too, Mapleton's one of the first townships that's doing this sort of thing. So we're lucky we can set the precedents rather than being forced to follow maybe what other communities have been doing. We can, like I said, set a precedent and show other communities how to do this and keep the farming going without legislating them out of business.
Thank you, Councillor. That's certainly not our intent. We are a farming community. So, but we are supportive of reducing GHG, and if we can work with our farming community to help them reduce their GHG, fantastic. But you're right, we do have a committee that we're striking, a committee of council. And if any of the public wish to be on that committee or consider for that committee, they can send an email to the clerk and that they will be considered. Other questions or comments? All right. I do have a motion here. Thank you for the delegation. I do have a motion here moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Tamlin, that Township of Mapleton Council receive for information a delegation of SEMA Plus, Alexandra Lazarevic, Julie Hardy, and Christoph Jenkins regarding the GHG emissions reporting framework and reference guides, the GHG emissions to be considered within a municipality, final results from the Township of Mapleton's 2021 GHG inventory, and the recommended reduction targets and measures. Any questions or comments from this now? Then I'll pose a question. Then all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you to the delegation for coming today.
Thank you for having us.
You.
We don't have any minutes from committees yet, but they will be coming shortly. We have reports from staff, and the first one we go to is the Finance Department. Moved by Councillor Reed, second by Councillor Martin, that the Township of Mapleton Council receive Finance Report FIN 2023-08 dated February 28th, 2023 regarding work undertaken for the Township's facility condition assessments as information. Mr. Morrison.
Through you, your worship, the report's just outlining some of the steps we're taking with respect to asset management and the methodology in which we are going to be assessing the 35 facilities. One of the unique steps that we have to undertake in the next couple of years is to determine what is an appropriate level of service, how do we measure it, and then apply it to a risk formula, so that eventually by 2024, you'll be able to compare apples to pears or peaches or whatever. I forgot the acronym. And it's be quite an interesting exercise when we start costing it out. If there's any other questions, I'll be happy to.
Any questions for Mr. Morrison then on this report? Or any comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the report? Thank you. Next, we go to the monthly communique moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Reed, that Township of Mapleton Council receive for information fire report FR 2023-03 monthly communique. Chief, you have anything to add to this report?
Yeah, it's just looks like a small report, only the
the two sides, one page, but there are a lot of interesting information that come up from this report. Not the hall cleanup, we'll just bypass that. That happens once a year or so. New legislation has, we talked about it before, certifications coming for the firefighters. It was passed by Ontario government last July. And our firefighters are looking at the level of service we have to provide, which the council will be determining this year. Our training officers and our deputies decided to ask all the members to come one at a time and talk about the training commitment they're going to make to this level of service. There's no sense of us trying to supply something we aren't going to be trained in. So that went over very well. We had all but one in Moorfield and all but one in Drayton come to these one-on-ones, and they got a lot of information about that on what the commitment will be for the next 4 years. Our training for February has been included water rescue. Just to show you how the weather has been up and down, we had Drayton first go to water rescue at the Conestoga River, and we had to cut a 6-foot hole in the ice, 6 inches of ice, to get the training started. Next week, Moorfield's turn, they had water running too fast for us, so we had no ice at all. So it was kind of a up and down thing, a little bit of both. We are doing off-road rescue last Tuesday on site in Moorfield. Our recruits, we have 6 recruits that are doing the county training. They started 1st of February. And for 6 months, they're going to go every second weekend to some place in Wellington County. It's all shared. And they're going to be doing different parts of the certification, the curriculum. And by July, they should have their training done, their testing done, and their practical skills reviewed by the fire college. And so we'll hopefully have 6 fully trained firefighters by the middle of July. January calls don't look like a lot. There's 10 calls there, but the extremeness or the extent of those calls, there was we had a house fire that was entirely consumed by fire, an old house, and they lost everything. A week later, we had a confined space, which involved the orange ambulance and some doctors coming in, and some whole bunch of agencies being involved there. And the week after that, we had a truckload of logs go through an intersection and hit a car. And so we had lots of gas leak and sparks from the hydro lines down. So we had everything in January, for even though there was only 10 calls. Last thing we have is a message that we are presently in starting the township has started a risk management assessment and a master fire plan. We're in the middle of that now. Got to accumulate a lot of information through past bylaws, through past statistics. They've given us a list of things we got to provide to them, and they're going to be very intensely looking at our equipment, our training, our facilities, everything we have. So they will be reporting that in a few months to council.
Thank you, Chief. Questions to the chief on his monthly communique? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the fire chief, the question is around the master plan. When was the date of the last one that we had completed?
It started in, I think, February 2019, done by the town of Minto, and we had that in the spring, I believe, presented to us.
Is it expired now, or what's the rationale for creating yet another one? I haven't, to be honest, I don't really recall seeing that master plan since it was created. And I guess my overarching concern would be we spend money to create plans and then a few years later create another plan and it kind of sits on the shelf. So what would be the plan for this master plan moving forward?
Last master plan gives us a lot of things to work on, a lot of recommendations, and we did year 1, year 2, year 3, a lot of those things in that plan, but didn't get to all of them. But there will be some that are repeated in this plan too. This plan will be a lot more thorough for sure, definitely. And it's part of the community risk assessment we have to complete by July of 2024. Every township has to do that to see where risks are and what kind of service you need to provide for that. It's leading up to our certification from the council.
It will be a more thorough report that's coming to council than the last one, as there are the new regulations from the province. Any other questions? And all's in favor of receiving the report for information? That's carried. Moving on, we have the resolution moved by Councillor Reed, second by Councillor Martin. Township Mapleton Council received Public Works Report PW 2023-02 dated February 28, 2023, with respect to the Ontario Clean Water Agency and 2022 summary reports, and that council acknowledges these reports satisfy legislative requirements. Turn over to Mr. Jamie Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor Davidson and council. Quite lengthy report here. To start off with, first of all, I'd like to thank Don from the Ontario Clean Water Agency. He's here tonight to answer any technical questions. Don produced the reports through Aqua. And so in the report, there was a 2022 annual report and summary reports for Drayton and Moorfield, all part of the regulations where we need to produce these reports for council, and they will also be once accepted by council will be put out for the public to be able to view on our website and here at the office if anybody wants to come in and review them. So if council had any technical questions on the reports, I read through them along with Don. We've had conversations, had no real concerns, 100% on everything, right? So pretty good job since 2002 with Aqua looking after both our water and wastewater systems.
Thank you very much. So I'll turn it over to council. Is there any questions on this report that either Mr. Morgan or Don Irvine can answer? Looks like you're getting off clean here. Just like our water, nice and clean. All right. If there's no questions, I'll call the question then. All those in favor of receiving this report and satisfying the legislative requirements? That's carried. Thanks for coming down. You're hanging out with him? Okay, that's coming. Next one is moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Reed. The Township Mapleton Council received for information source water protection report SWP 2023-01. Mr. Kyle Davis, Risk Management Official, dated February 28th, 2023, regarding Township Mapleton 2023 Source Protection Annual Report, including the Wellington County Municipality Source Protection Annual Reporting Summary Table 2022. You're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to be here. I provide a brief summary of the annual report for the Township of Mapleton. So source water protection is delivered collectively through all of our local municipalities at Wellington County and through the county itself. And that's the Wellington Source Water Protection logo, I guess. So what I have here for you is a summary of the activities within the Township of Mapleton. You'll see the number of inspections that were conducted, which are predominantly around activities close to our municipal wells, like manure application and or chemical storage or winter maintenance. You also see the number of development applications. So these are planning or building applications that our staff review. It's a subset of the larger number of planning and building applications that come in. These are only the applications that are within the vulnerable areas close to our municipal wells. Also, I wanted to highlight for you where we're at in terms of existing activities within the wellheads that could potentially pose a risk to the municipal wells. You'll see that we have about 4% of the activities left, so 12 activities, so 96% complete within the wellheads. So we are working, we're not quite at the 100% that the Clean Water Agency is at, but we are working towards that for sure. And then last but not least, I wanted to talk just briefly about education outreach. We do compliance like inspections, but also the education outreach is a very important part of the program as well. And part of that, along with our own education outreaches, we support the Waterloo Wellington Children's Groundwater Festival. That's been virtual the last 2 years, and I'm just pleased to announce that this year it will be back in person and will actually be in Wellington County. It'll be at Guelph Lake. So there'll be some invites going out to our local municipal councils closer to the date. It's June 5th to 9th. And we welcome about 1,000 kids a day to that festival. So thank you very much. I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Wow. All right. Yeah, I'm sure you're glad to be back in person for those.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're definitely looking forward to it.
Questions then? Councillor Ottens.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. With regards to the water festivals, you said 1,000 kids a day sounds like a lot of kids to put through, and it's in Guelph Lake. Has there ever been a thought of perhaps branching out and having one for northern Wellington kids that's locally, Conestoga Lake is right here, then you wouldn't could branch it out a little and our kids don't have to travel so far, assuming they even attend?
Yes, that's a great question through you, Mr. Mayor. This is actually the first year that it's actually in Wellington County. It's been held for over 25 years and always has been at the Waterloo Regional Museum in the regional Waterloo. So this is actually the first year that we're moving into the county. But yes, we are actually talking about in future years about what does the structure of the festival look like? Is there an opportunity to have it in multiple locations, both within Waterloo Region as well as Wellington County? And so feedback and comments are definitely helpful because once we get through the festival in June, we'll be actually entering a strategic planning session to look at exactly that. And where would it make sense? Would it be north and south in the county? Is it back to the regional museum? You know, all of those options are on the table. So thank you for those comments. We'll take that back to the committee.
And although it's called Guelph Lake, it is in Wellington County, even though the city of Guelph tries to claim it as theirs. When they have their hillside festival and all the rest, they try to say, oh, it's our festival. No, it's in Wellington County. Any other questions for Kyle? Thank you, Kyle, for coming today.
Thank you very much.
So I read the resolution. All those in favor of receiving this information? That's carried. Next, we have the approval of bylaws. Moved by Councillor Reed, second by Councillor Martin, that bylaws number 2023-014, 2023-015, and 2023-016 be hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. Questions, comments on those three bylaws? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor then? That's carried. We don't have any correspondence for council's direction. There is one item there for council's information. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. No provisions. Number 15, other business. Anybody bring up anything for the other business? Then we'll move into a closed session. Moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Reed. Township of Mapleton Council move into a closed session to consider the following subject matters: review and adoption of the closed session minutes, February 14, 2023, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. All in favor? We go into a closed session. We have 10-minute recess for it before it.